For the past 2 weeks, the bishops of the United States have asked us to join in a campaign called the Fortnight for Freedom as a way to protest the decision of the Obama administration to require that religious bodies offer, if they offer health insurance to employees, that it include contraceptive coverage for women. After a protest, they did modify that to some degree, yet the bishops were not satisfied with that and believe that it limits our freedom, limits our ability to practice our faith as we see fit. And so they've asked us to join in this campaign for freedom, a campaign of prayer. Our own bishop asked that the priests of the diocese reflect upon that with people and preach a homily about the importance of religious freedom. And so in response to that, I'm doing that today, and I'm thinking about religious freedom. Just want to make a side note that it wasn't inspired at all by anything to do with the Supreme Court's decision just this past week regarding the health insurance mandate. That's a totally separate issue from this, and I don't think that the church has any particular position on that. That is, it seems to be a purely political matter. They have some issues about health insurance for all people, but the means of doing that, I think, are still up for grabs, so to speak. But I have, I think, 4 ideas that I want to express about that. I'm sure there are many others, and people have different ideas and opinions, but these are the things that came to my mind. First and foremost, what they're talking about is that this is an issue about religious freedom. It's not necessarily about the requirement of contraception, which everybody knows has not been widely accepted as a teaching of the church by the faithful. But that seems to be an internal matter for the life of the church, and something that the church itself is an issue for the church to decide. The issue is that the government is requiring us to do something that's contrary to our teaching. And this is the reason that it becomes a matter of religious freedom. They're requiring us to do something. And what it means that is that the government can use its coercive power. It can impose a fine or require some other payment, or I don't know what other measures they would take to penalize an institution for not doing that. And this is clearly that they are using, as I say, their coercive power to impose upon the church to follow it. This seems to be a clear violation of the separation of church and state. This was the whole point, that the state would not be telling the church what it should be doing. And of course, the church is not there to tell the state what it should do. It doesn't have coercive powers against the state. But today, it's about contraception. What will it be tomorrow? Let me say that these contraceptives are also abortifacients, meaning that they are things that produce abortions, which, whatever our controversies about the acceptance of the church's teaching on contraception, there's hardly any rejection, I think, in the life of the church about the teaching on abortion. The very few Catholics, I know that there are always a few people that oppose anything, but very, very few Catholics are opposed to the church's teaching on the immorality of abortion. This is a fundamental teaching, a fundamental respect for the dignity of human life. And so maybe today maybe those contraceptives do cause that. Maybe they'll require later on that we have to pay for abortions as well. And what else would they require for issues of health care? Would it require the production of that we cover production of life outside the womb? And if it were just restricted to health care issues, what else would they make a mandate about that is maybe popular within the culture, but still is contrary to the teachings of the church? Today, gay marriage has become more and more accepted within society. It's passed by laws of the state. Would they require a church to perform perform unions for homosexual couples? If they did that, if you don't accept that, would we lose our right to perform civil marriages at all? Well, I imagine that we could spin out all kinds of other terrible things that could happen, reminiscent, say, of Nazi Germany. I think that's probably a stretch. I don't think that that's really ever going to happen here in our own country. Still, on principle, the government shouldn't be telling churches what to do. They don't need to be using their powers to tell the church what to do. We shouldn't be telling the church the government what to do. They shouldn't be telling. Worse still is when the government tells the church what to do. They should be butting out. Secondly, I would say that it really violates, and I think this is more of a social policy idea, is more and more violating the idea of a limited government. Our government, one of the genius, I think, of the American government has been is that it has a limited role. It doesn't attempt to do everything for the people. It doesn't attempt to resolve all of our problems. We kind of like for them to resolve our particular problems, but it's not really the mission of the government to solve all of our problems. And if we start asking the government to do that, they will do it. They will try to do it, but they're never very successful at it, in my opinion. And it's more and more intrusion of the government into the life of the people. Seems to violate one of those really basic principles of limited government within society. But of course, at the heart of it is the issue of religious freedom. And I read an interesting article by a man named Sheldon Richman. Sheldon Richman wrote this article. He wasn't writing about religious freedom. He was writing about economic freedom and the importance of economic freedom and how there's a lot of talk about economic freedom. And he said, well, the reality is there's no such thing as economic freedom. There's only freedom. Economic freedom is a part of that freedom. And I thought, well, there's some wisdom there. Freedom is the basic issue that is present for us, and whether it's economic freedom or political freedom or social freedom, individual freedom, religious freedom, it's all an aspect of the word freedom itself. And that freedom is what is at the heart of things. We have to stand up for the importance of freedom within society. Now, admittedly, there's limitations to our freedom. They're agreed upon for the common good of society. So freedom is not an absolute, and yet we should guard as precious very much our freedom and not sell it off for some benefit that is stated by government officials. Freedom is really at the heart of it, and we should stand up for freedom. And below that, or what freedom is really protecting, is the right of conscience. Conscience, of course, is that inner voice that says to us, this is right, this is wrong, do this, don't do that. And I know that people can appeal to their conscience and say, well, my conscience says to do this. And it can't be used to justify our doing whatever it is that we please to do. We have to legitimately form our conscience. We have to open our mind and listen to the truth. We can't use our conscience simply as an excuse. But still, our conscience is our conscience, and that needs to be respected. It needs to be respected in society, it needs to be respected in the church. Our conscience is a very precious thing. Ultimately, we're judged by God according to the way that we have used our conscience and followed our conscience. And so freedom is a way for us to express our conscience, to live out conscience in our life. And the fourth thing that I think an issue for us in the church is that the bishops are involving themselves in politics. And the reality is that we don't really like that. We don't want anybody telling us what to do. We don't like people telling us what to think and how to behave. And when it seems that the bishops involve themselves in the political life, it seems to be violating some boundaries that exist there. They should be strictly limiting themselves to talk about church matters or religious matters. And of course the difficulty is, how do we define that? What limits church matters or religious matters? And our tendency is to say, well, these bishops, especially in this present time, have not proven themselves to be paragons of virtue. They're not perfect people. Their record is besmirched. They've lost credibility because of the sex abuse scandal. And therefore, we don't have to listen to them. Well, if we're going to pull out that club for the rest of our lives and say, you can't tell us what to do, you're not perfect people either, we never have to listen again. You're never going to have to listen to what the bishops say again, because they're never going to overcome their past, right? They can't change the past. They can't make it any different. Maybe in the present they could do something different, but this would be really a violation of, I think, of our responsibility really to form our conscience and to listen to the leadership of the church. Our faith is that the bishops are guided by the Holy Spirit and guided as a body and as individuals